I loved it. I got to know who the drummer is of that band. I felt like I was watching Mute Math. That dude. What I loved about what we just saw is, there was a moment where maybe a wrong word was sung, or there was like certain little things like that. But like the energy that they brought, like the thing that I grasped from that was that they believed every single word they were singing and playing. And I think that when we're crafting our services like that overall, the end message, if I was watching that, it's like, I believe everything they're saying. There's nothing fake about that. And just the energy and the joyfulness, man, that's what people need right now. And so I love that. That was awesome.
It was. It was so great. Dave, I can't wait to hear from you. So many folks look up to you as a leader in the worship community. And now you're going to be telling us about crafting our online worship service and just kicking it off with driving it home. You're right, believing in your message. Take it away, Dave. I can't wait to follow along with what you have to say today.
Well, Paul, thank you so much for having me. I always enjoy being a part of this. And if we're meeting for the very first time, my name is Dave Dolphin. I'm a worship pastor here in the Oklahoma City area. I have vocationally been doing like full time being a worship pastor for the last 7 or 8 years or so, but I've been involved in worship ministry for almost 25 years. That's been being a part of a volunteer band, being on tour and, running sound and being a part in supporting other artists. It's taken on lots of different forms and factors. But I have been involved in a worship ministry for over 2 decades. Here at the church that I'm at Cherokee Hills in the Oklahoma City area, just to kind of give you an idea of scope, whatever, we typically have like 350 in the room. So I'd say we're like a medium-sized church. So I have that experience, but I'm also someone that creates content on YouTube as far as trying to help other worship leaders with kind of the practical side of what we do. I noticed many years ago, especially when worship music was kind of making this turn in the late 90s into the 2000s, like it was the style was shifting, and there was a lot of things out there and a lot of resources that were available for the spiritual side of what we're doing. But I was like, okay, we get that. That's great. Now, like, we're introducing drums and guitars and mixing sound, like everything's different. Like, how do we do that? And so I have for the last several years created YouTube videos on a platform that is like YouTube to help other worship leaders do what they do. And so those, like, I feel like right now in this day and age that we're in, with just being, with the shelter at homes and doing our services online, like those two worlds are colliding. The fact that I am a worship pastor, but I'm also this YouTuber that has designed online content. And so I know that a lot of the questions that are being spoken about either, today and or in the chat, or the questions I see in Facebook groups all over the place, a lot of it is the technical side of like, how do I mix my audio, and how do I get this camera set up, and how do I get the text of the songs on the bottom part of the screen, what app do I need to download, and a lot of those technical things of like, how do I do this. I want to take a moment and I want to focus on what, now that we got all of these things connected, we have all of our technology connected and we're doing it, like, what are we going to do with it, and why do we want to do it that way? I think that our what and our why needs to drive our how. And here is what I think is the tendency. I think that the tendency is, we, especially now when we're like all scrambling trying to figure out what are we going to do. What do you mean we can't meet together in our room? Like, we can only do online. We've never done online before, or maybe we have been doing online before, but how are we going to do all this? The tendency is just to try to add cameras to what we already are doing. And we're used to seeing this as a lot of larger churches and and smaller churches that have been doing this for years, where you have this in-room experience, and then you add these cameras, to help people that can't be in the room to be able to engage with what's going on. And you get these close-up camera shots so you can feel like you're kind of a part of what's going on. But the main priority with a lot of these live streams that you're seeing is the in-room experience, and the focus is on how those people are engaging with what we're doing in our services, and then we add to it these cameras. Maybe if you take it one step this more of a direction, maybe take something like the Oscars, which again is a in the room experience, but most of the people that are watching the Oscars are watching the Oscars. They're watching it on television. So there's this priority placed on the how the how people are experiencing it through cameras and through all that. It's not so much the experience in the room, but it's still at the end of the day this live event that is happening, and then we're adding all these different camera shots. But think about what we're doing right now in this moment. Even if you've been doing live streaming at your church for the last 5 years, 100% of the people that are engaging with our services, and we're using these services to help encourage people to grow in their relationship with God, 100% of them are experiencing it through a screen, whether it be their television, through their iPad, through their computer screen, their phone. And so I feel like the game is different, and we need to allow ourselves, if we haven't already, is we need to sit down with our teams, and we need to give ourselves the permission to rethink everything. How we structure our services, how we do worship, how is the message, the order of our elements, even how long this is going to be. I think we need to make sure that we are spending time to rethink how we're doing things before we start then taking, okay, this is what we do. How do we add cameras? How do I mix my audio? How do I do all these different things? Here's a great example. Is I remember right when all of this COVID stuff was starting to kind of come down, like the NBA had just shut down their season, and we were starting to see the very beginning steps of we might not be able to meet in church. And they were shutting down large groups. If you watched the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, they did one show, they did their normal, but they didn't have a studio audience. So they tried to do everything normal, but they didn't have anyone in the audience except for maybe a couple of staff members, just because of some of these like they were limiting the size of the groups that could meet together. And if you saw that, it was really awkward. It just removing that one element. They tried to do all the normal things, and the end result was a show that was really awkward to watch. And so they pivoted, they changed. If you've watched Jimmy Fallon lately in the last week or so, it's completely different. It is him in his house with his family. His wife has the cell phone and is just recording on a cell phone. The kids are all running around. And even like the kids, like instead of having like graphics at the bottom of the screen that says like who the guests are, or what the logo is, it's literally his kids drawing drawings with colors and crayons or whatever, and he just holds it up to the screen like this, and it's a completely different flavor. He does interviews with guests, but he does it through a Zoom call, and then they all stitch that together, and it's way lo-fi. It is, he's trying to do a monologue, but then there's also the kids that are not paying attention, and they may think it's funny or not funny, and but it's working. Like, if that's what you have to deal with, he's pivoted. He's, instead of saying, well, this is how we normally do it, we got to do it in our the auditorium that we've always done it in. No, they've pivoted. They've allowed themselves to sit in a room and decide, hey, is this how we need to be doing it for a completely different way of delivering the content? And so me as a worship pastor, but also me as a YouTuber, I want to share with you some of the things that when these worlds are colliding for me, when I'm trying to lead worship and I'm trying to create these services, but also knowing what I know about creating video for an online world. I want to share how those, like just some basics of how that's coming together. And then I want to take a moment and kind of talk about actually what we're doing and what I see some of my friends doing and some other churches doing, so that we can leave with this bag of tricks. Because we all have like a couple of weeks under our belt, right? Of like, we've tried this, and some things are probably working and some things are not working. And we're all making changes on the fly. And I heard someone explain it this way. It's like March Madness. If you're a basketball team in March Madness and they always ask you like, what's your strategy? It's like, I'm just going to win the next game. And then I'm going to worry about the next game after that. Like, it's just, survive and advance. And so I feel like a lot of us are doing that. So I want to kind of leave you with a bag of tricks of some things that I see different churches working, and you can take those away with you as we're all trying to figure this out. as a YouTuber, one of the things that is really important to understand about online versus creating other kinds of content, whether it be a presentation in a room or even, the difference between creating a movie and a TV show versus creating online content. And it's this idea is that there is lean back experiences and there are lean forward experiences. A lean back experience. Think about when you go and see a movie. It's been a while since we've been able to do that. Hopefully, we can do that sometime this year. But think about when you go into a movie theater and you're going to experience and go see a movie. Like you settle down and you sit in that seat and you kind of have your brain wrapped around the idea that you're going to be here for the next couple of hours. And if there's a part in the movie that is kind of slow or boring or offensive or whatever, you generally stay through it. Like you're there to watch that movie. You have paid the ticket. You are there to to watch that movie. It takes a whole lot. It has to be really bad, really slow, really offensive for you to get up out of your seat and walk out of a movie theater. Because watching a movie is a lean back experience. You're going to lean back in your chair and you're going to engage in this content. Listening to a podcast is a lean back experience. Those that do podcasts will tell you that if you can get that person, if you can hook that person in the first couple of minutes and that phone goes into their pocket, then you know that the chances are high that they're going to listen to the entire podcast episode. Because it's a lean back experience. Even a television, even if you've got a remote control in your hand, you can flip through different channels. It's generally considered a lean back experience. A lean forward experience is I've got my phone like this and I'm watching a video on my phone. There, now you can see my phone. I'm watching my phone and there's all these other things I can tap on. There's all these, different videos that are being suggested to me. And think about like when you watch a YouTube video, if there's a section that's just not boring, or it's not interesting, then you tap away because there's other things to watch on YouTube, on Facebook. You tap away, and so your attention span on a lean forward experience like online video is much shorter because there's so many different options for people to click on at any given moment. Now the benefit is that when you do have someone's attention, you really have their attention. If they are engaging with your content online, they are engaging with your content. They're doing nothing else. They're not trying to do laundry. They're not talking to their friends. They are engaging with you, but the chances of them going on to something else is much greater. So like pacing becomes a high priority. There's things you have to think about. Now, I think what we're doing right now and this very unique time period, I think it's a little bit different because people sit down on Sunday mornings and they maybe like a movie or they have set aside the time and said, I'm going to engage with, this is the only way I can engage with my church family. I would much rather be in a room, but that's not an option. So the next best thing is to be in my living room and to engage with people in a chat and be able to engage that way. So it's the chances of people like, I'm really bored, I'm going to go onto a different church service and like church hop like that is probably not as great as the typical YouTube video, but there are still distractions. There's still notifications that are coming on someone's phone or the 50 other tabs in the browser window of whatever they're watching on Facebook. And so these are things that I think about that we are creating to some degree this lean in experience where we've been used to creating these services that are in person where you kind of have them. I mean, they can get up and leave, but it's a little awkward. And so if the sermon is a little bit slow, or even just the transitions, from one element to another are a little bit slow and kind of clunky, you get through it. Whereas with a video that you're doing online, it doesn't translate as well. And here's an example, another one that I want to give you that goes back to YouTube of 2011. Now, you got to go back about 10 years, and it's not the powerhouse content creator that we think of them now. YouTube is still pretty new, but they wanted to be that dominant force of like, okay, we want to compete with the big boys. People are watching Netflix, people are watching NBC. We want to be considered a place that you can go to be, for content. And so they spent $100 million. $100 million. That's a lot of zeros. And they got a lot of proven celebrities to make original content for YouTube. And so you have all these different celebrities that are used to being in front of a camera, have an audience, you know how to do this. They've been in movies, they've been in TV shows, and they worked with YouTube and had this big, huge budget to create content for YouTube. And here's what happened: it failed. It failed miserably. It didn't bring over the audiences, it didn't increase the views, it didn't like the content that these people created for YouTube wasn't wasn't any good. Now, these are very talented celebrities. They're really good in their movies, they're really good in television, but when it comes to YouTube, it just didn't land. But there was a small sliver of that $100 million budget that was given to several people that were already starting to make content on YouTube. They weren't movie stars, they weren't on television. They were starting to become popular because of the content that they were making on YouTube. And they were starting to kind of figure out that YouTube was a little bit of a different animal. And little people like PewDiePie would say that this was the one of the catapults into the big, huge kind of powerhouse that they are now. These big, huge empires, these YouTube empires that you see now, a lot of them will go back to that moment and say, hey, that really added some fuel into the fire. And what people that have studied this have learned is that creating content for online is different. Just because you're a movie star and you're used to walking into a studio with a camera, with lights, and if you keep doing the same things that you're doing, it's not necessarily going to translate. Same thing for us that are very used to creating content that is supposed to be, engaged with in a live room, in a live setting. And we might have this experience of already having a live stream and lots of cameras and things like that. I want to encourage you to sit down, if you haven't already, and rethink everything as you are creating these gatherings of your church service that are 100% online. Let's talk about what makes a good video for just a second, because I think there's four things that I think make a good video, and they're not going to be in the order that you think that they should be. The number one thing that makes a good video is the content. The content has to be there. We have all seen things on Facebook that were shot really poorly, looked horrible, sounded horrible, but it was funny, or it was inspiring, or it was shocking, or whatever it was. So content is king. The very next thing that, as far as like, if you look at a video and you say that's a good video, the very next thing is audio. If you have video that looks amazing and is lit well and on a really nice camera, but it sounds like the person is in a tunnel and the microphone's way on the other end of the room, it's much, much harder to engage with that content than if the opposite were true, where the video doesn't look amazing, but the audio is crystal clear. As you guys are working on your services, I would spend a significant amount of time really dialing in the audio and making sure that it sounds good. Spend more time there than you are on like how your video shots are, because you're going to get more bang for your buck. So what makes a good video? Content is king. Audio is really, really important. The third thing, by the way, we haven't mentioned the camera yet. The third thing is lighting. You can actually make a really good camera, or you can make a really horrible camera look amazing with just being very intentional about your lighting. Here's a great example. You're watching it right now. This camera right here is the FaceTime camera on my 2012 MacBook. It's a horrible camera. It's fuzzy. It doesn't have a lot of contrast. The colors are really kind of goofy. But one, I got my Yeti mic right here, so I have nice, crisp audio. I've got this light up here. If I turn this light down, you see how this is just the normal light in my room. All I do is I flip this light up, now it looks normal. And so this really horrible, crummy camera with good audio and some lighting makes this a lot more palatable, and hopefully the content's good. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. And I just have this, by the way, this little light here, this little portable light, and I just stick it up here. and do that. A lot of YouTubers have gotten their start because they just took their phones and put it up in a windowsill and got that really nice soft light that comes from outside, and turn off all the other lights in there in the room, and they would set that phone right up there in their windowsill, and they would shoot videos, and they have made huge YouTube empires just with the phones on their camera and using the natural light from the window. And when we're creating these services online for our churches, it doesn't take a lot to be able to make really good, engaging content that's going to help people to continue to grow in their relationship with Jesus. But we just need to make sure that we're focusing on the right things. Camera matters, but not that much. Lighting, audio, and how you use those cameras matters a little bit more. Let's dive into that bag of tips and tricks. I want to kind of talk about some of the elements, like some of the things that we're doing, some of the things that I've seen other churches doing that I think are really working extremely well. Let's talk about the worship section for just a second as I take some water. Thank you for that. We've decided to stick with a full band. We normally have about 7 people that are on the stage, and then we also use tracks. And we decided to keep that. Now, I've seen a lot of people be very successful with acoustic, and we've even seen that today throughout Worship Summit, because some of the people that have been leading worship today have been the full band, and some people have been 2 people and an acoustic guitar. Both work really, really well, especially for online content. We've decided to do the full band, but we made this change. Instead of having the band all kind of in line like this and then facing out to a bunch of seats, which are empty, we instead put all of our people in the round. And so we reconfigured our stage completely and just put everyone in a circle, 6 feet apart, social distancing. And it does a couple things. One is it makes the camera shots that we're getting more interesting, because what makes a camera shot interesting is depth. Here's an example. So here's me, right? I'm here, but there's a lamp back there, and I got an acoustic guitar. Like, you can get an idea of how deep the room is that I'm in right now, because of there's things that are near, there's things that are far. Sound like Grover, or is it Grover or Elmo? Near, far. Don't do that. I guess you could do that in your church services if you want to, but when you create this round, you can have a camera shot that's over someone's back, and so you get the real closeness of someone's back and the piano or the drums or whatever, and then it shoots across to the other side of the circle where you have different people, and now you have this depth. Versus, like, if I was setting up the shot and it was just this gray wall and that was it, there's nothing else here, it would be a really flat, boring shot. So one of the reasons we're doing this worshiping around is to make the camera shots much more interesting. But it also helps the worship leaders, because we've all been there. Like, we've done this the last couple of weeks when we're in these empty rooms, whether it's live streamed or if we're pre-recording it, leading worship to an empty room, or probably more true, we're leading worship to people, but we're doing it through the lens of this. And we're kind of transcending time and space in kind of a Doctor Who kind of a way, that there's a real person that we're leading on the other end of that camera lens, but we don't get the benefit of seeing them or being able to see their reactions instantaneously. And so that's difficult. That's really hard to do. So having other people to look at that are members of the worship team makes that a little bit easier, because you don't feel like you're so alone. You at least know that you've got each other and you're leading each other. But and then that'll springboard to like leading other people that are watching on the other side of the lens. I've actually seen a church, there's Church on the Move up in the Tulsa area, very large church, see tens of thousands of people typically on a Sunday morning, over several campuses. Their main campus is a room that seats 2,500 people. They're known for their big, huge, immersive worship environments with lighting and sound and all of that. And they're really good about the live stream that they produce. They're probably one of the best that I've seen. They have, at least in the last week or so, done their worship in the round as well. And they did the same thing. I mean, they set up this more intimate, accessible, it's just, I don't know, it's a little bit more like behind the scenes. It's a little bit more backstage. They have these road cases like you would normally see like a touring band store all their gear in. That's how so that's how they store a lot of their stuff and move it around their different campuses. And they kind of left that out. It kind of reminds me of watching the TV show The Voice, and they always have their equipment kind of sitting around. Like here's a guitar over here, and here's a road case over here, and they even have like the curtain that normally is closed between their stage area and their backstage area. They have that open. It just feels a little bit more personal, a little bit more behind the scenes. And the same thing, a lot of their camera shots are like being shot over someone's shoulder to the next person, and it looks fantastic. The Village down in that's Matt Chandler's church down in the Dallas, Texas area. At least last weekend they had an acoustic, keys, and two vocalists. In a room, and they made it nice and pretty. But again, it was real small and intimate. There's a benefit to being able to, when you're leading worship like this through a camera, and you can get a little bit closer. It's a little bit more one-on-one, even though you're leading people, a whole large group of people, you get to do so on a one-on-one basis. You're connecting with that one person watching on their screen. You're connecting with that family of 5 in their living room versus trying to connect with all these people at once in your room. Another example I saw was Life Church. They have set up their band, a normal band, and they're all kind of on their normal X as far as like where they would normally stand on the stage. And you've got a drum position and you got a keys position, and like there's, their guitar players and singers and all that are on their normal X's on the stage. What I've noticed that they've done that's a little different is that they're all kind of, instead of everyone facing out into an empty sea of seats, the singers especially are all kind of looking into each other, almost like how you would if you were, if you were rehearsing a song. You're sitting on your X, you're standing on your X, but you, instead of facing forward, you're kind of leaning in or turned in a little bit so you can see other people, and you're making sure, like, am I playing this right, or what's that other person doing? And being able to, I don't know, just it creates a little bit more of an intimate moment. I think that in this time and space, the authenticity is going to rule over the polish. I mean, that's always been the case, but even now more so, we can lean into that. Even if it's just like, if you're a really small church and all you have is this and your acoustic guitar in your living room, you can do that. And that is going to translate really, really well. There's some things you want to do in terms of your audio and lighting and things like that, but you can lead a really good time of worship with just this. Honestly, so we've been doing like this multicam pre-produced thing with 4 cameras. One of the cameras is a GoPro, and the other cameras is my phone and my kids' phones. I use my kids' phones because 1, I pay for them. 2, because those phones come home with me after we record all that, and I can get all of the footage. We have access to really nice DSLR cameras, but we decided that using these camera phones, because they're all kind of the same, it makes it a little bit easier to match them all together. And again, as long as the audio sounds amazing, then it's, people are going to forgive the lesser quality of the video. The audio has to be good, and I would, if you need to get it like mixed afterwards, I would encourage you to do that. Here's an example of that, or here's why. When you're in a live room, there is a lot of like liveliness and reverb and energy that is happening, that is hiding a lot of the blemishes. So if you hit a wrong note, or if the drum groove is a little sloppy, or if there's pitch issues with the vocals, the room is going to hide that. Even just like a subpar mix, just the natural energy of this band on stage that's loud, you can cover that. Not completely, but it does hide some blemishes. When you have just a raw recording coming off your board, it shows you every little nuance, every little problem. It's like if you have experience with using in-ear monitors, the first time you used them, you probably hated them, because if you had a wedge, you had like a stage monitor that was, again, a speaker in a room, all the liveliness, it's going to hide some of those blemishes. And then all of a sudden you put an earphone in, and you hear every little thing. It was like, oh, I don't like this at all. And so live is the same way. And so being able to have the ability to maybe go in and pitch correct some of the vocals, or spend some time mixing it. There's a lot of people that have a lot of experience, that are really good sound engineers, that right now the entertainment industry is pretty much shut down because there's no tours, there's no gatherings, there's no concerts. And so a lot of people that are used to being out on the road and mixing audio and doing different things are sitting at home, one, twiddling their thumbs because they have nothing to do, and would really like to make some money right now. And you can probably get someone that's really good and get them on the cheap, because you can maybe establish, like a bulk rate. Hey, we're going to do this every single week. It's going to be some steady work, and they're going to take it because it's better than nothing. A lot of these people love the capital C church and would love to help your church, but that would be some time and money well spent if you would multi-track record your stuff and then go get them professionally mixed and make that audio sound good. Let's talk about preaching for a second, like the preaching segment of the message. Normally, when we're crafting our services, we have our pastors probably standing on a stage, pacing back and forth, and they're in a very large room. And I mean, think about that for a moment. Like right now, I'm sitting here and I'm talking to you in a really normal tone, like a very conversational tone. But if I were to go back here and stand up here and be a pastor and talk really loud because I'm trying to communicate to like a big, large room, like in a room, like a big, like if you're in a, a couple hundred seat auditorium, that might work. That looked really awkward just now. You're like, Dave, don't do that again. So there is a lot of benefit, I think, to maybe changing up how your pastor is going to deliver the message. I would think in terms of teaching, if they were going to teach a class on a Wednesday night to a room of a dozen or 2 dozen people, what would that look like versus what they've always done on stage to a very large room? Our pastor, last couple of Sundays, has actually recorded his message in his home. The first Sunday he had to, because he had just come back from a foreign country and thought it was wise to self-quarantine for 14 days. Not that he had any symptoms or anything like that. He literally just came back from a foreign country, but we're like, he was like, I think I probably just need to stay home. And so the first Sunday he did it because he had to. The second Sunday he did it because it really worked well. Here's our pastor. Here's our leader of the church, this familiar face that we God's messenger that we need now more than ever. And he's in his home speaking in a very calming tone. And you see pictures of his family back behind here. And, and the thing on his fireplace that says home sweet home. And, it really worked well. And it was a shot, like the way it was framed was kind of like this, where it's like mostly of his face and a little bit of this, and you can see the whites of his eyes and be able to connect with his his facial features, versus if he was standing and way far like I was earlier. I won't do that again. It doesn't translate as well on video. And so I would think intimate, I would think small, I would think accessible. I know a church in the Austin area that they've kind of created a little bit of a small, like a studio audience, because they have a pastor that thrives on people. And there is something about having a live audience and kind of working that room. And so they've set up something in the lobby of their church. It's not even their main auditorium. It's not even the main stage, but they've set up this thing with a little pub table, and he sits at that, and he's got his Bible set up on that. And then there's a couple of people in the room that, when he tells a joke, there's some people that can laugh, that can kind of give him that immediate feedback that kind of helps them to keep on going. Again, I would say when it comes to your preaching that the audio has to be good. Our pastor just used his iPhone 10, and because it was, really close to him, the microphone that was on his phone was good enough. And now if the phone was like way back here, then it wouldn't sound as good. But because it was really close to him, it was good. Oh, here's another pro tip. If you're using your phone, don't look at the screen. Look at this little dot right here. I saw Matt Chandler do that. Like, for some reason, you could tell he wasn't looking at the people. He was looking at the confidence monitor, and he's having this conversation, and it kind of looks like this. And it's like, no, buddy, I'm here. I'm here. So that might be something that you kind of walk your pastor through in terms of, like, even if they use their iPhone, to be able to do that. Some of the other elements that I would think through as you are crafting these services. Again, whether it's pre-recorded or if you're doing live, we have chosen to do pre-recorded and use the Premiere feature. And I'll talk about why here in just a moment. But one of the things that we did is that we are really leaning into familiar faces and familiar elements. We have a service opener that we run every single Sunday. A lot of churches have these. And for people that are brand new to the church, it's a great way to communicate in a minute and a half what the church is about. What do we believe? What's our focus? You know, um, what's just what are we about? You can get a real good idea of the sense of the church by watching that. Most other people in the room are not even paying attention. They're still talking to their friends, whatever, but there is that subconscious thought of like, oh, I hear that song or I see that video, it's service is getting ready to start, but they're not really paying attention to it. And so as we're creating services that are probably primarily for just our people, we went ahead and we included the service opener. And here's why. There is in a time right now where everything is upside down and everything is weird, and there's we're it's just a lot of uncertainty. The more familiarity that we can bring, the calmer it is. And so seeing that service opener that we are used to seeing, my computer wants to update right now, and we're going to say try tonight. Sorry. um Seeing that familiar uh service opener, it gives them a sense of like, hey, I remember when I saw that in church. It's familiar, it's calming. And so we went ahead and we included that. Then go from that service opener into a welcome time where we have a host, usually one of our pastors or someone that people are very familiar with. And that person comes out and they set the tone, they set the mood, they even set the expectations for what this is going to be. And so I think that's really crucial, having some kind of host or your pastor or someone come in and just set that tone, that they can be, is this going to be a joyful time? Is it going to be a calming time? Is it going to be an exciting time? Is it going to be a friendly time? Like, what is that tone that you want to set? How are you going to set that stage? What's that mood going to be like? And even the expectations. Hey, especially the first or second time that we did this, we're all kind of learning, okay, as much as we as the church, we're learning how to produce content and how do we craft a service that's 100% online. We're also leading and shepherding our people, and how do we engage in content that is online? Okay, yes, we know that you're probably still in your pajamas. Yes, we know that you're sitting on your couch or you're on your back patio. We know that it's one thing to sing in a room full of people, it's another thing to sing to a TV screen. But we're going to encourage you to do that. We want you to turn the TV up. We want you to sing loud, just as if you were in the room. Or maybe another expectation is, hey, make sure you engage in the chat and say hi to people, but when the message is happening, let's really focus on what our pastor is saying, and let's really connect with that. You can set that expectation. I think that's really, really important. One thing that we're trying this weekend that we haven't done yet is this idea of what I would call a virtual lobby, where we have normally been doing our services starting at 10:45 because that's our normal start time for a service. People are used to that time, so we stuck with it. But we're going to, instead of starting our service right at 10:45 with the service opener and into all the things, we're actually going to craft our video where it starts 5 minutes earlier, and we're going to have some like pre-roll content that's like the before the show. Like at 5 minutes into the video, it's the real service and we're starting, but we're going to kind of create this like pre content. And I've seen a couple other churches really do this and do this really successful. One of the reasons why I think it's important is that it gives people a chance to get their technology set up, as far as like people are trying to cast these videos up onto their screens, or they're trying to get get the video to start playing and all of that. And so it gives them some time to get all that stuff set up. I know that like on my Apple TV, I can't actually start the service for the YouTube premiere until it actually premieres. So I kind of have to like watch it on my computer. And then when I see it on my computer, then I actually go on my Apple TV and connect it. And so, I know how to do that, but it's like one weird little extra step. And so this allows us to get it set up a little bit earlier. It also gives people a chance to socialize. And that's the one thing that we miss, right? When we can't gather in person, is being able to socialize with other people and to say hi and to kind of be in their lives. I mean, I know that I have really enjoyed when our service comes online and you start seeing names of people that you recognize. It's like, oh, Angela, it's so good to see you. Brett, it's so good to like just seeing their name makes me happy, because I can't see them, but I know that they're there and they're out there and we're experiencing this moment together. And I think that's really, really important. And so it gives people a chance to socialize. And also, I've seen it done like it's almost you can, we're going to use some slides to kind of like set that expectation and do some different things, talk about how, if you want to give, this is how you do that. I've seen some people actually treat it like a pregame show. Like if you were watching a football game, like there's the football game and it's going to start at 7 o'clock. But they started a pregame show at 6:30, and you've got these announcers that they're sitting at a desk, they're being really casual. You've got this, you can see the football field out in the background, like you have the anticipation that something's about to happen. And so maybe you have like your actual set for worship, like back here, but then that's back here, and then you have maybe a table set up and that's a little bit on the edge, that is like out of it's a little bit more behind the scenes, and it can be a little bit casual, and you can maybe engage with people in the comments and treat it more like a live stream, where like someone says something in the chat and you can respond to it and all that. And again, it really helps to cultivate that community, which is the one thing that we miss when we're just engaging with content online. I will say, when I mentioned at the very beginning why the YouTube thing, when all of those like famous people try to make content with hundreds of millions of dollars, the reason why it failed and why the people that were used to YouTube succeeded with it is that they understood that it was kind of a two-way street, that it wasn't just talking at a camera, you're talking with people. And so another thing I saw that I thought was really cool, the Village Church in Dallas, that's Matt Chandler's church. They normally have their kids do like a memory verse. It's like part of their kids ministry programming is they'll have like a memory verse that they've put to a song. I think like it was like Philippians 4:4. And they, what they did is they actually included it at the front of their service. Say, hey, we're going to get started, but for the kids that are in the room, we're going to do our memory verse. And so it gave something for the kids that are like, this is something they're used to seeing and some familiarity for them. It also gave the parents a small little window into what the kids, how they typically learn and what they see, because normally that happens in kids' church. It doesn't happen in big church. And so I thought that was really, really cool. When you're crafting these services, you need to think about that the response is going to be digital, that, you're not going to have people that are raising a hand or people that are going to walk forward. Instead, these people are going to comment, leave comments or maybe send you a DM in the church accounts, and you need to be ready for that. I've seen churches where they ask for prayer requests, and they kind of the pastors set up this like war room, that they would, as these prayer requests kind of came in with their pre-recorded video, they were able to engage with that and to be able to like say, hey, that's a youth, you need to take that one, or this one is so and so, you need to take that one. And they could actually like engage with people and respond with people and like literally type out the things that they were praying for people. So like your response time, you still need to have that, but you got to think in terms of digital and knowing that you're going to be connecting with people through like maybe DMs and through comment sections versus people raising hands and walking forward to an altar. Paul, is this helping?
Yes, no, I'm so glad you mentioned that. I had the same thing happen to me. I was on a totally another side of the world looking at a marketing conference, and they said, reply to every comment. These are real people. And it finally connected with me, and I went, oh my gosh, these are not just digital nonsense. These are real people who want to communicate with you.
Yes. We've seen like a couple times, one or two people will jump in there and say, hey, I'm new, this is my first time here. And what I've loved is I've watched our church people jump in there and they'll say, Linda, it's so good to see you. Linda, glad you're here. I'm glad you're watching with us. We're so excited that you're here. And I mean, what better way to welcome a brand new person? And there's like a specific story, and I keep saying that her name is Linda. I've shared this story a couple of times. Her name really isn't Linda, but her kid was friends with another kid that their family goes to our church. And that was the reason why they connected with us. And they communicated with our staff afterwards. And they said, I've really felt really anxious because my daughter is starting to kind of she's got a fever and she's starting to show the signs, and my dad's doing this. And like, I'm really scared right now. And I engage with your service, and I feel peace, I feel encouragement. And so that service was opened the door for that, and then it connected us with our people and our staff to be able to further that on.